I've decided that the siren must not ring just for pro wrestling, but for all cultural events, because that's exactly what boxing is again. After I was up until 2 a.m. watching a boxing fight, we have feelings coming off of Canelo Alvarez, Bud Crawford on Netflix, and Crawford beating Canelo Alvarez and beating him decisively. Look, welcome to a Sam Roberts Now emergency. And the reason we are here is because we have feelings. I turned on Netflix last night, and I know usually these reactions come immediately after, but that fight ended so late that I figured I had half the day before we could even make the argument that I was more than 12 hours removed from the end of the fight. It was almost 2 o'clock in the morning when the official word came in that Crawford had won over Canelo. A lot of people thought that Crawford might win, but if you looked at betting odds, he was absolutely the underdog. I thought that this fight was a major, major success for boxing, and boxing needs those successes. I am not a boxing expert. I am somebody that watches these kind of cultural events and these things that become bigger than what they are by definition, these things that become pop culture events. And that's exactly what Canelo and Crawford was. And I thought that it was great, and I felt uplifted by it, because most of the time when these fights become these sort of cross-cultural events, it's involving like an influencer or a retired fighter coming back, or something that is trying to either tap in to outside of the boxing world or tap in to boxing back in its glory days. But it's rare that you get two fighters that are fighting on this level, just the best of the best in the sport, and they're able to turn the fight into something so much bigger than just the best fight that boxing can produce right now, because I think that they were successful in doing that. 70,000 people sat down in a Las Vegas stadium, paid $47 million to watch this in person. I watched it on Netflix. I was happy to say that there were no lagging issues. There were no streaming issues. I watched it straight through for the most part. I mean, I did actually turn this thing on at maybe it wasn't 9 o'clock, but it was 9:30, and I did other things. I got some work done. I was on my phone. Whatever. But I watched, did they need all those fights leading up to it? Probably not. Did this fight need to wait until after midnight before it hit the ring? Absolutely not. It was almost 1 o'clock in the morning by the time the fight hit the ring. No. I was dozing. But I thought that the third from last fight was amazing. They probably could have given us a 2-fight undercard, or in hindsight, I wouldn't have been mad if this fight had happened overseas, because we would have been able to watch it here in the States in the middle of the afternoon. But regardless, yeah, maybe this is just me being a bitter old man that's not used to staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning anymore. But that's what I did, because I was that interested, and I felt like my investment paid off. There were two boxing champions that were actually fighting. When they built it up to say that we're going to crown an undisputed super middleweight champion, I was like, okay, are you going to be able to pay off this build? And they did pay off the build, man. It was two great fighters having a great fight, not a fight where they were dancing around each other, not a fight where they were avoiding each other, but a fight where these two beasts were fighting each other. And there were no referee shenanigans. At the end of the night, when the audience and the announcers and those of us watching at home were clearly we know who won this fight, the judges didn't come back and say, well, actually, this round went to Canelo and that round went, no. It was yeah, this is what we saw. And it wasn't I don't know. I didn't think it was one-sided for a Canelo fight. I think Canelo got beat worse throughout the fight. I mean, we're not used to seeing Canelo lose at all, but Canelo got beat throughout the fight worse than we're used to seeing Canelo get beat, but still was an absolute beast. It was not one-sided by the definition of one-sided, in my opinion. But to just see this, at the end of the night, the guy who won the fight actually won the fight. And you turned it off. There's so many times where we have these big events. And you realize it's been all hype. At the end of the night, it's 2:00 in the morning. You turn the TV off and you're like, yeah, it was kind of a waste of time. They got me again. And this was one of those rare times where you didn't feel like they got you again. You felt like, okay, the thing that they promised was delivered on. And that, I think, is why I liked it. I mean, I think seeing Terrence Crawford, who's now the first in at least the modern era undisputed champion in 3 weights, becoming that undisputed super middleweight champion, and feel like, even for those of us that don't follow the sport as closely as people who are actually journalists, I'm covering this like a cultural event. I'm covering this like I would, going to see a movie or something, except bigger, because it feels like we're a part of something. And that's what it did. It felt like we were a part of something. But like, even for a novice, because that's what you need, right? You need to impress boxing fans, but you also need novices to look at this and, like, if they know anything about any sport, understand why the weight that was put on this was put on this. And I felt like that was also delivered on. That you felt like when Bud Crawford was named that undisputed super middleweight champion, it felt undisputed. If Canelo had won that fight, then it would have felt disputable. We would have been sitting here going, what was that? Why did we build this up? Clearly the fix was in. And that's happened too many times in boxing, especially when it comes to these super fights. Clearly the fix was in, either getting the feeling that there was more of a cooperation going on between fighters, or getting the feeling that the judges knew who they thought was going to win this fight before they walked in. The fact that we didn't get that feeling is like, yeah, this is the direction that this needs to go in. There was such a clear difference between this and so many of the big fights that we've seen with, like, the influencers and the guys that are retired, because there's no qualification that you need to make before you talk about this, or fight about it, or argue about it, where you go like, yeah, but what do you expect? I think, like, after the Tyson fight, or I guess what are we getting? Now we're getting Tyson Mayweather again. And I already know. If I make a video, if I have to light the siren up because I've got feelings after Tyson versus Mayweather, I'm going to come out here and I'm going to say, well, what do you expect? It's been Mayweather is at this age and he's always fought like this. And Tyson, Tyson is so far beyond, but still they were able to pull this. You don't need any qualifiers for it. And it's nice. I mean, you don't really have that many big names. I think like Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia get a buzz going. Not a buzz like this, but they get a buzz going. And I guess Jake Paul is fighting Tank Davis next and I think that that's a good thing, because I feel like now, you're always going to get interest in, like, influencer gimmick boxing, these exhibition fights that feel like exhibition fights. And even if you call them pro fights, it's like we know that we're watching because it's involving, some kind of influencer, some kind of guy who's famous from something other than boxing. And so you're not expecting, like, the greatest boxing fight that you've ever seen. You're expecting a boxing fight that's good enough to go, oh, you know what? I didn't think he was the real deal, but I got to give him credit. And for Jake Paul to now be stepping in there with Tank Davis next, I think that that's what you need, because the more fights that you have like this, what we saw last night, the more you're going to have people going like, you know what? I've stepped away from being a boxing fan. I'm a serious boxing fan, and it's going to be more and more difficult, I think, to put on those fights that are more about the celebrity and the name, and not necessarily about the quality of fight. People are already like talking about whether or not maybe, Canelo Alvarez has now officially gone past his prime. Maybe Canelo Alvarez doesn't have to fight anymore. I've heard, the analysts say that. I know Max Kellerman, as soon as he got in the ring, was talking to Terrence Crawford about whether or not this would be Crawford's last fight, which Terrence Crawford didn't say that it was going to be his last fight. He didn't even really address that question. But if you watch the post-show press conference at all, there was nothing in Crawford's body language, at least in the part that I saw. I didn't watch the whole interview because it was, very late at night. But at least in the way that he carried himself with, like, such a confidence and such a, like that quote, which is just the best. I love when sports is like this. When they said, when did you know you were going to win the fight? And he said, when I signed the contract. Like that. Like without missing a beat. Oh, in the 5th or 6th round, I felt, no. When did you know you were going to win this? When I signed the contract. You guys thought that I might not, but I always knew that I was going to. And maybe that was just that post-fight buzz. Like, I can't imagine getting to the end of that fight knowing, oh, I won. Like, I absolutely won. And everybody in this building, there's 70,000 people in this building that know I won. The analysts on the outside of the ring know that I won. The people at home, the millions watching at home on Netflix know that I won. And these judges know that I won. And then they say that you won. It's that there must be an ego wave, well-founded, that floats you into whatever's next. So I'm not surprised that confidence was there, but it certainly didn't feel like the words of somebody going like, okay, I'm done. And honestly, as big as I'm sure the payday was for both Alvarez and Crawford for this fight, the fact that it was as good as it was, the fact that it lived up to the expectations, which were very high, I can't imagine the money that would go into a rematch. A year from now, however long, maybe more, the amount of money that these two could make having a rematch here would be massive. And it's the type of fight that could rebuild the sport. So I hope that that's what we get. I hope that we get a rematch, not only because it's proven to be such a big kind of, money fight, but I want these two guys now, as big as the paycheck that they got for this fight, the fact that they earned their paycheck as much as they did, they're entitled to another one and a bigger one. And I think that, Canelo's been making big paydays for a long time, but Terrence Crawford, he's had some big fights, but that big headline, the whole world is talking about it, fight check. Canelo's gotten those. Crawford hasn't gotten as many, and I want Crawford to get as many giant checks as he can before he hangs up the boots. So I hope that we did that, because also, how many more big names are there in these weight classes? And is this a weight class that Terrence Crawford wants to stay at? I think a lot of people thought that he would be slower than he actually was because he had to go up in weight to get this title. But obviously, it wasn't an issue. I thought that, the fact that they treated Crawford like an underdog made the whole thing feel even bigger, feel even more historic when it all went down. I thought that the announce team, and, I'm a nerd because of the world that I'm in, I'm going to look at that stuff. The announce team, I thought the announce team was great. Sometimes I look at this announce team and I'm like, who did they get? And as much as I love Snoop Dogg jumping in or this guy jumping in, I love that this one stuck to boxing. It's like all the celebrities are here. They're in the building, right? And you see them throughout the night. But when it comes to the presentation of this fight, this is boxing. And I thought, having John Anik there, who I feel like is... John Anik's probably my favorite play-by-play guy in combat sports. I don't consider pro wrestling a combat sport. But outside of pro wrestling, I think John Anik is just excellent on play-by-play. I love Max Kellerman, so I was so happy to see him back and being in his spot. And I thought Andre Ward was perfect for color commentary. I mean, I was really impressed with the whole thing. And yeah, I thought that it was great, and I thought that it was great for Terrence Crawford. I hope and pray that this is the last time they do it that late at night. And I know it's Vegas, right? But like, even in Vegas, you can't tell me that there aren't people that would love to go catch a show, right? And you can see it too. And it's really interesting because this happens a little bit with UFC. It doesn't happen at all with pro wrestling, but it happens way more with boxing, where up until the main event, that stadium is empty. $47 million gate. And people are not showing up for the undercard. That's how much, like when you talk about fighters earning pay, like in boxing, that's how much those fighters are entitled to the gate, that it's a good spot for the people on the undercard. But just look at the audience and understand that they're paying all that money for one fight and one fight only. And I think also to be a part of something. But you could be a part of something earlier in the day. or do it all overseas. I don't know. I'm being very selfish. I just don't want to stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning anymore. But it was a great Saturday night. It was long, really long, really long. The fight itself was great. Boy, did we have to put in work to get there. I think, I think you can do a prelim show on YouTube. And I don't know, maybe Netflix is invested in people, just streaming for 4.5 hours. But I've got to imagine, right? Here's the thing. I've got to imagine that now that people know, because I saw when you click the streaming thing, it said it was scheduled for 4 hours and 45 minutes. I said it's probably just a ton of overrun. So they can do whatever they want. But it wasn't. It was not a ton of overrun. It was hideously long. I think that they can do some kind of do the prelims on YouTube and just do Netflix, give me the 2 fights. I don't think anybody would ever complain if it's you have one undercard fight, or even they called it a co-main event, right? Your co-main events, just 2 fights on the Netflix feed so that I can go watch the doc about the high school catfish again before I get to the main event. I don't know. It's just, and I think too that now that anybody sat through that, realizing how long it's going to be, I think even next time, if you still go, no, there's going to be a 5-hour Netflix special. Nobody's tuning in for the first 3. You'd be a maniac. There's no way you'll catch me doing that again. I am not tuning in for the first 3 because I think I slept through a fight. I'm not 100% sure. I saw the main event, but I'm pretty sure I slept through a good chunk of the co-main event. And that's not respectful. That's not a nice thing to do. But it was one of those where I'm not 100% sure. But I do think that I missed a lot of details. So I would imagine a couple of times when I thought that I blinked, it was several rounds of action. What do you expect, man? It was a late show. It was a long show. But the fight was excellent. I had a great time. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Let me know if you think this siren should be running here. And if you enjoy the idea of Sam Roberts Now, happening now, and when do you watch it? You watch it now. I'd love to know your thoughts. Leave them in the comments. We'll talk again soon.